Whispers behind studio gates couldn't cage these fearless women. From silent screen goddesses to primetime legends, they loved openly, defied contracts, and rewrote Hollywood's rulebook one daring embrace at a time. Each story hides a spark the censors never snuffed out, and we're about to ignite them for you. Smash that subscribe button so you never miss the untold truths that made Tinseltown shimmer. Alla Nazimova. Silent-era superstar Alla Nazimova never pretended to fit the studio mold. By the early 1920s, she owned the Garden of Alla on Sunset Boulevard, turning the estate into a safe haven where women who loved women could be themselves behind high hedges. Nazimova referred to her circle of actress lovers, Gloria Swanson, Natasha Rambova, and young protege Rudolph Valentino's wife, John Acker, as her sewing circle, an inside joke everyone on set understood. She financed and starred in daring films like Salome, coated with queer imagery that censors barely caught. When asked in interviews why she refused publicity romances with male stars, Nazimova smiled and said she'd rather let her work speak truth. Off-screen, she lived openly with Broadway actress Gleska Marshall for more than 2 decades, hosting Sunday salons where Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas rubbed shoulders with Hollywood's closeted elite. Nazimova's transparency cost her studio backing, yet her independent productions paved the way for future queer creatives to keep artistic control, and her mansion became ground zero for a defiantly visible lesbian subculture in Golden Age Los Angeles. Tallulah Bankhead. Sultry, gravel-voiced Tallulah Bankhead treated her sexuality like an extension of her southern audacity, impossible to hush. Reporters who called her romances with women rumors earned a withering stare, and her signature retort, "My dear, I'm pure as the driven slush." On Broadway, she swaggered in men's dinner jackets, then imported that gender-bending allure to Hitchcock's Lifeboat. Bankhead was publicly linked to singer Billie Holiday and actress Patsy Kelly. She went so far as to introduce Kelly at parties as "my wife." A notorious raconteur, Tallulah peppered radio shows with double entendres, delighting troops on USO tours by bragging she had nothing to hide but my brain. While studios fretted over the Hays Code, Bankhead signed one-picture deals, refusing morality clauses that would muzzle her private life. The price was steep, fewer starring film roles, but her stage career thrived, and she leveraged that freedom to champion gay rights long before Stonewall. In an era obsessed with secrecy, Bankhead's flamboyant candor made her both an industry headache and a queer folk hero whose unapologetic life still electrifies LGBTQ+ history. Marlene Dietrich. Berlin-born. Marlene Dietrich glided into Hollywood, wearing a tuxedo and kissing women on the mouth, on camera. Joseph von Sternberg's Morocco immortalized her androgynous charisma, but Offset Dietrich took the performance further, escorting girlfriend Mercedes D'Acosta to premieres arm in arm. She kept a running list of lovers, both Cary Grant and French chanteuse Edith Piaf, categorizing them as particularly amusing. Paramount's publicity chiefs begged her to tone it down. Instead, she doubled down, headlining Harlem's drag balls in top hat and tails. During World War II, Dietrich entertained Allied troops with bawdy parodies of military brass and gifted signed pinups to lesbian soldiers who dared ask. Even J. Edgar Hoover's personal file couldn't find leverage. She'd already confessed everything in her own interviews. Dietrich's refusal to closet herself never derailed her superstardom. Rather, it broadened it, proving a global audience could embrace an icon who belonged to no single gender or nation. Her open affairs and refusal to label herself turned her into a living argument that authenticity sells tickets more reliably than any studio-manufactured image. Eva Le Gallienne. While Hollywood chased ingenues, Eva Le Gallienne built a theatrical empire that shouted her truth from the mezzanine. Founder of the Civic Repertory Theater in New York, she aimed to elevate American taste, but tabloids preferred her offstage passion for actresses Josephine Hutchinson and later Marion Evans. In 1927, a messy palimony lawsuit forced Le Gallienne's orientation onto front pages nationwide. Instead of issuing denials, she invited the press to her next opening night, quipping, "If they must stare, let them buy tickets." Hollywood beckoned with lucrative contracts, yet she turned most down, prioritizing roles she could shape without censorship, like Peter Pan and Queen Gertrude, characters she reimagined through a queer lens. Le Gallienne mentored future luminaries, including Uta Hagen, encouraging them to resist studio typecasting the way she resisted compulsory heterosexuality. When McCarthy-era watchdogs blacklisted many gay performers, she safeguarded them in her repertory company, quietly funding salaries out of pocket. Le Gallienne's courage transformed a scandal into a platform, proving an openly lesbian artist could command critical respect, a loyal audience, and the financial clout to protect her community. Patsy Kelly. Wisecracking character actress Patsy Kelly lit up 1930s comedies with street-smart one-liners, but off-camera she delivered punchlines that left censors fuming. After rooming with Tallulah Bankhead during the Little Foxes tour, Kelly told reporters they were closer than sisters. Figure that out. In 1938, she survived a fiery car crash that killed her partner, boxer Wilma Cox. 2 years later, she testified at the inquest, calmly identifying Cox as her fiancé. Gossip columnists expected contrition. Kelly instead leveraged the tragedy to demand equal billing, citing the fragility of life and contracts. Though major studios labeled her difficult, she kept steady work in Hal Roach shorts, often improvising lines that slipped past the Hayes office. By the 1960s, she was out to directors and castmates, advising young actresses to save your money and never hide your girl. When she won a Tony in 1971 for No, Nanette, Kelly thanked all the dames who kept me honest. Her openness didn't just defy Hollywood's hypocrisy. It seeded a lineage of character actors who refused to separate talent from truth, proving that visibility can coexist with longevity even in the industry's toughest trenches. Louise Brooks. When audiences first saw Louise Brooks whirl through Pandora's box as free-spirited Lulu, they assumed the character's open bisexuality was pure European art house daring. In truth, Brooks had already lived every shade of that spectrum. She kept a Paris notebook of first times that listed flings with dancer Anita Berber and, most notoriously, a one-night encounter with Greta Garbo, later describing Garbo as the most tender masculine soul I ever knew. Brooks treated sexuality as rebellion against the studios that tried to bully her into long-term contracts. She bolted to Weimar Berlin instead, signing telegrams, "Your unmanageable girl." UFA executives begged her to ditch the Bob and the girlfriends for a Paramount comeback. She laughed and turned down their cash advances. Back in New York, she wrote scathing essays about Hollywood's hypocrisy, noting that male execs who blacklisted her for immorality quietly asked her to procure women for them at the Algonquin bar. She died in 1985, proud that her early candor outlived the moguls who once blackballed her. Lilian Tashman. 6-foot Lilian Tashman strode onto sets in silk trousers, cracking jokes so risque studio secretaries blushed. The gossip columns called her Beverly Hills mansion Liloe, a den of sapphic chic, but insiders simply recognized it as the only A-list address where queer women could dance without chaperones. Tashman's black book included stunt pilot Pancho Barnes, fashion icon Vera Maxwell, and a tempestuous on-again, off-again liaison with Greta Garbo that ended when Garbo fled to Sweden. Undaunted, Tashman parlayed her reputation into scene-stealing roles as the delicious villainess in Girls About Town and Millie, films so frank that the Hayes office tightened its rules the following season. She married gay actor Edmund Lowe in what both joked was the best studio contract either of us ever signed, securing dual cover stories while letting each continue discreet affairs. Diagnosed with abdominal cancer in 1933, she threw one last party, instructing friends to wear white because funerals are drab. Her openness, and her trophy cabinet of studio memos she refused to sign, became a cautionary tale for censors, but a rallying myth for every queer performer who followed. Grace Darmond. Silent-era workhorse. Grace Darmond made 67 films, yet Hollywood remembers her less for the Gaiety Girl than for the night she bolted from Rudolph Valentino's wedding suite, straight into the arms of her lover, Jean Acker. Darmond and Acker had met at Alla Nazimova's Garden of Alla Soirée in 1918, striking a pact. They would front Lavender Marriages only if it bought both women better roles. When Acker wed Valentino in 1919, Darmond coolly attended as maid of honor, then spent the honeymoon week with Acker, while tabloids speculated about the bride's nervous breakdown. Industry bosses grudgingly tolerated Darmond's open companionship with women, believing her wholesome screen persona would offset any scandal. But when she demanded top billing after Nazimova's Salome flop, Metro dropped her, citing morals. She left for Europe, produced shorts with Parisian lesbian filmmaker Germaine Dulac, and returned stateside in 1927, flush enough to finance queer artists through the crash. Darmond's resilience proved that careers could survive, even thrive, once an actress seized her own capital. Jean Acker. Jean Acker's entire fame once hinged on being the woman who wouldn't let Valentino in the bedroom, but her real legacy rests on a lifelong defiance of compulsory straightness. Acker publicly sued for spousal support after the non-consummated marriage, arguing she sacrificed emotional freedom for publicity, a daring admission in 1922. When columnists pressed, she snapped, "My affairs are with ladies and lawyers. Take your pick." She soon moved in with former Ziegfeld dancer Chloe Carter. The couple bought neighboring burial plots, an audacious gesture when same-sex unions were legally impossible. At Nazimova's urging, Acker wrote a tell-all screenplay, My Husband's Wife, only to watch studio heads shelve it indefinitely. Rather than retreat, she pivoted to real estate, turning sewing circle whispers into investment leads and quietly funding lesbian writers blacklisted in the 1950s. Acker lived to 1978, sipping cocktails at the motion picture home and claiming she'd outlasted every producer who told me to keep quiet. Her papers, sealed until 2030, are expected to expose just how many top-tier actresses relied on her counsel behind closed doors. Willa Hervey. Towering comic star Willa Hervey won hearts as the powerful Katrinka in the Toonerville trolley shorts. But behind the camera, she lived an even larger life. In 1920, she fell for painter Nan Mason on a film set. The pair promptly rented a Woodstock barn, painting murals by day and screening rough cuts for bohemian friends at night. When Hearst Papers labeled the retreat a sapphic art colony, Hervey mailed editors hand-drawn cartoons captioned, "Correct," then sold syndication rights to fund independent films. The couple stayed inseparable for 59 years, crossing America in a Model T packed with canvases and reels, staging pop-up exhibitions that doubled as underground queer meetups. Hollywood tried luring Hervey back for sound comedies, but she insisted on clauses allowing Mason producer credit, a deal-breaker in 1932. Instead, she became an early television pioneer, hosting a live children's drawing show where she signed off, "Tell someone you love them, today." Hervey's meticulously kept scrapbooks, donated to the Stonewall National Archive, reveal contracts stamped "Lesbian, do not hire," which she saved as trophies of battles she won simply by remaining visible and thriving. Greta Garbo. If Alla Nazimova coined the sewing circle, Garbo perfected its mystique. Studio publicists sold her as the Snow Queen recluse, but behind Swedish reserve lay a cache of love letters to playwright Mercedes de Acosta, letters the Rosenbach Museum still safeguards. Acosta described courting Garbo like chasing a furious storm, yet the actress spirited her into closed-set trailers and San Simeon weekends, introducing her as my life's editor. When Louis B. Mayer demanded a publicity romance with co-star John Gilbert, Garbo skipped the press call, leaving Mayer to fume while she and Acosta retreated to Big Sur. Garbo's refusal to deny the relationship, she simply answered, "I have chosen my own life," became Hollywood's worst-kept secret. After Acosta's candid 1960 memoir, fan mail from queer servicewomen poured in. Garbo secretly financed many of their college tuitions, a quiet rebellion that matched her on-screen sovereignty. Kay Francis. Warner Brothers billed Kay Francis as the most fashionable woman in pictures, but insiders called her King Kay for steering both wardrobe budgets and love affairs. Francis kept a suite at the Beverly Wilshire where dinner guests might encounter socialite Hope Williams on Francis's arm or Marlene Dietrich sampling costumes. Unlike studio-arranged beards, Francis negotiated her contracts to exclude morality clauses, explaining, "My personal life funds my artistry." When columnist Luella Parsons hinted at lesbian liaisons, Francis retaliated by leaking studio salary sheets showing male leads paid double for less screen time, weaponizing gossip into labor leverage. During World War II, she toured army hospitals, requesting wards of female medics first so she could speak freely. Decades later, Biographers uncovered diaries in which she logged lovers by first name and rated them for wit, courage, discretion, a record of female solidarity hidden in plain sight. Dame Judith Anderson. Audiences remember Judith Anderson's Mrs. Danvers as cinema's ultimate sapphic villain, but Anderson's off-screen candor surpassed Hitchcock's subtext. In 1957, she bought a Santa Barbara cliffside home, locals nicknamed Seascape, the only place where actors blacklisted for queerness could rehearse Tennessee Williams scenes without fear. Williams himself joked that Anderson ran the best finishing school for terrified lesbians. Though she entered 2 brief marriages to satisfy Broadway investors, Anderson dismissed them as jolly rehearsals gone wrong. Scholars reviewing her 1970s lecture tapes found she refused men-only Q&A sessions, stating audiences deserve the whole of me, and that is decidedly female. Her taped 1990 interview for Hollywood Lesbians was embargoed until after her death. In it, she calls heteronormativity a tedious prop. That self-authored archive, now at UCLA, confirms what peers already knew. Anderson's authority stemmed from a life defiantly, visibly, her own. Nancy Culp. Television viewers adored Nancy Culp as prim Miss Jane on the Beverly Hillbillies, but offset, she swapped tweed skirts for motorcycle leathers and Palm Springs poker nights with mostly female veterans. During her 1984 congressional run, opponent Buddy Ebsen tried to queerbait her. Culp responded with a televised smile, "Birds of a feather flock together, bud, and I rather like my flock." Although she lost the race, she gained national headlines as one of the first classic-era performers to acknowledge lesbian identity on record. In her Hollywood Lesbians interview 5 years later, she urged young actors to claim your authenticity before someone else names it. Culp spent retirement teaching drama at Juniata College, donating her Screen Actors Guild pension to LGBT youth shelters, and stipulating the gift be announced in her obituary so no one edits the truth I lived, Agnes Moorehead. Before she twitched a sitcom nose on Bewitched, Agnes Moorehead commanded Orson Welles' Mercury stage, insisting rehearsal rooms remain free of small minds, that includes the homophobic kind. In a fiercely guarded 1973 taped conversation later published in Hollywood Lesbians, Moorehead joked she preferred witch roles because they allowed her to live openly. Everyone already thinks witches consort with women at night. She kept a ranch called Villa Agnes, where actress Debbie Reynolds remembered women partners living like wives without apologies. Studio chiefs suspected as much when Moorehead rejected publicity dates, but her box office prowess forced them to relent. In 1968, she funded a scholarship at Ohio's Muskingum University on the condition it be awarded to students excluded for being different. The endowment remains, the clause untouched. Moorehead's legacy proves Hollywood's character queens could use clout to carve genuine freedom and leave paper trails daring future generations to follow. Bliss Dallett. A charter member of the Algonquin Roundtable's 4 writers, Bliss Dallett made her name in 1920s talkies like A Star is Born while cultivating a legend in New York's queer bohemia. Dallett was so publicly devoted to Tallulah Bankhead that gossip writers dubbed her the shadow in Tallulah's spotlight. At Texas Gwinnan's Lesbian Speakeasy, she entertained playwrights by reading Oscar Wilde in drag, and she never bothered with studio beards, turning down a Republic Pictures contract that required normalizing publicity. Daley's greatest coup came in 1935 when she shepherded a troupe of out-of-work queer actors into WPA theater, openly listing lovers as next of kin on federal payroll forms. Those records, unearthed in the 1990s, prove she lived as an out lesbian at a time when that honesty risked jail under New York's anti-masquerade laws. Ona Munson. Forever remembered as Belle Watling in Gone with the Wind, Ona Munson found her real paradise inside Hollywood's sewing circle. Beginning in 1932, she shared a bungalow and a table at the Trocadero with poet Mercedes de Acosta, a liaison so open that columnist Hedda Hopper quipped, "Munson has no use for nights when queens suffice." 3 lavender marriages bought her leading roles, but she protected her girlfriends by insisting on separate banking accounts and joint wills. A Warner Brothers memo blacklisting all known Watling confidants surfaced during the 1947 UIC hearings. Munson retaliated by naming studio executives who ran private gay brothels. Though depression ended her life in 1955, probate filings list 3 women, not her husbands, as chief beneficiaries, a paper trail of deliberate, fearless disclosure. Libby Holman, torch song Siren. Libby Holman burst onto Broadway swathed in men's tails and a gardenia boutonniere, telling reporters the look honored My Lady Louisa Carpenter. Holman's interracial Harlem Nights and pistol-flashing scandals terrified white financiers, yet she remained defiantly public about the women she loved, Jean Eagles, Tallulah Bankhead, and especially Carpenter, with whom she raised children on a Delaware estate the press nicknamed the female DuPont's Fortress. When charged with murdering her husband in 1932, Holman exploited the spotlight to condemn anti-gay policing, walking into court arm in arm with Carpenter. Acquitted, she underwrote NAACP legal battles and financed queer playwrights, bragging she spent alimony on liberty. FBI files declassified in 2004 admit agents failed to silence her because public empathy favored the widow's frankness. Beatrice Lillie. The original Exit smiling star blended slapstick with sapphic chic, billing herself the gal who'll steal your girl before the second chorus. Lillie's whirlwind with heiress Hope Williams filled the New York Times Society pages in 1932. Neither woman issued denials, and Lillie worked the buzz into record box office for her review B. Lily's Flying Colors. Offstage, she escorted Tallulah Bankhead to Harlem drag balls, where Duke Ellington introduced them as royalty without crowns. Wartime tours found her crashing British officers' messes in full male uniform, a gag that doubled as protest against the UK's sodomy laws. Declassified MI5 cables revealed generals begging Churchill to restrain her. He replied, "Let the lady entertain." Lillie's estate later endowed London's Chicken Shed Theatre on the express condition it host an annual LGBTQ youth musical, sealing her legacy as comedy's irrepressible queer godmother, Katherine Cornell. Hailed as the First Lady of the American stage, Katherine Cornell treated Broadway and occasional Hollywood cameos as platforms for artistic and personal autonomy. Her 1921 Lavender marriage to director Guthrie McClintock functioned as a shield that allowed lifelong partner Nancy Hamilton to travel openly as production manager. Cornell's Beekman Place townhouse became rehearsal hall by day and lesbian salon by night. Diary pages describe Greta Garbo reading Anna Karenina aloud, while Mercedes D'Acosta sketched costumes. When U.S. visas for queer European refugees stalled in 1939, Cornell leveraged her box office clout to threaten a national theater shutdown. State Department memos show the visas issued within a week. After World War II, she co-founded the Stage Door Canteen Scholarship Fund, stipulating preference for talent barred by prejudice. Cornell retired to Martha's Vineyard in 1955, but her will donated the townhouse to what is now New York's LGBT Community Center, an act of openness as commanding as any curtain call she ever took. Spring Byington. Bubbling through You Can't Take It With You and a dozen other 1930s comedies, Spring Byington projected homespun wholesomeness, but off-screen she built one of Hollywood's most transparent same-sex households. After meeting character actress Marjorie Main on the 1933 set of The Right to Romance, Byington invited Main to share her Toluca Lake cottage. Studio drivers soon learned to drop call sheets for both women at the same address, and visitors recalled Main cooking, while Byington recited Spanish poetry on the patio. Biographer Michelle Vogel notes the pair traveled under joint passports and filed consecutive IRS returns that listed each other as dependent. When MGM urged Byington to stage a publicity courtship with Lionel Barrymore to soften whispers, she refused, quipping, "I'm busy playing Ma Kettle's husband." Her candor didn't tank her career. Instead, she pivoted to radio, where CBS couldn't very well fire the title voice of December Bride. In the 1950s, Byington sat on the Screen Actors Guild's Welfare Committee and quietly routed emergency funds to outed gay extras blacklisted by studios. She died in 1971 with Main at her bedside and left half her estate to the motion picture home for tenants whose families will not claim them. A final salute to the community she refused to hide, Claudette Colbert. To the public, Oscar winner Claudette Colbert embodied urbane heterosexual glamour, yet her private ledgers reveal a life anchored by a woman. After retiring in 1961, Colbert bought the 18th-century Bellerive plantation in Barbados and invited longtime confidant Helen O'Hagan, an executive at Saks Fifth Avenue, to run the house. Visitors noticed matching signet rings and identical offices where Colbert edited scripts while O'Hagan managed investments. When biographers traced Colbert's estate after her 1996 death, they found O'Hagan's sole executor and principal heir, affirming a bond Colbert never disavowed. Industry archives show Colbert negotiated contracts without morality clauses as early as 1935, citing sovereignty of domicile. She arranged separate residences from her surgeon husband during shoots, he in Manhattan, she on set, with O'Hagan handling wardrobe approvals. Studio chief Harry Cohn once threatened suspension over rumors. Colbert produced box office ledgers, proving her pictures out-earned Rita Hayworth's, and won the standoff. The Barbados years became a salon for discreet queer artists, from Cecil Beaton to director George Cukor, all of whom signed Bellerive's guestbook, now housed at the British Film Institute. Colbert's strategy, cloak personal truth and financial unassailability, let her live authentically decades before coming out, had cultural protection. Janet Gaynor. Hollywood's very first Best Actress winner cultivated a peaches and cream persona, yet Janet Gaynor's domestic life quietly defied studio orthodoxy. Her 1939 marriage to famed MGM designer Adrian was widely accepted as a lavender arrangement. Adrian, openly gay within industry circles, would design the gowns and guard the gates, Gaynor joked to columnist Luella Parsons. Gaynor spent far more time with Broadway ingenue Mary Martin, sharing adjoining ranches in Brazil, and later a San Francisco apartment whose lease listed both women as joint tenants. In 1950, the pair survived a near-fatal car crash. Hospital records show Martin listed as Gaynor's next of kin, a status recognized by California without controversy only because Gaynor's stardom commanded respect. Diaries published posthumously reveal the partners co-parented Martin's son, future producer Larry Hagman, and referred to themselves as the two Janes. Even after semi-retirement, Gaynor used her clout to secure non-discrimination writers for studio art departments headed by queer designers. She died in 1984, her will splitting assets equally between Martin and Adrian, cementing a triad the public never fully deciphered, but insiders long revered as Hollywood's most functional chosen family. Margaret Lindsay. Warner Brothers groomed Margaret Lindsay as the next Bette Davis, until she refused the traditional starlet playbook. Lindsay flatly turned down studio-arranged dinners with male co-stars and declined a lavender marriage that publicity chief Jack Warner offered to calm the fan magazines. Reddit archived press clippings and the 2023 biography Lesbians Shaped Hollywood, 1910 to 1969, document her open cohabitation with society photographer Mary McCarty throughout the 1930s. Cast crews reported Lindsay and McCarty arriving arm in arm at rap parties, and publicity photos show McCarty operating the still camera on Jezebel's set while Davis giggles beside them. When columnist Sheila Graham hinted at sapphic indulgence, Lindsay retaliated in print. Indulgence is cocktails before noon. Affection is nobody's business. Though Warner's reduced her leading roles, Columbia grabbed her for the profitable Ellery Queen B series, proving audiences cared more about charisma than compliance. During World War II, Lindsay toured factories with the Hollywood Victory Committee, but demanded appearances before women welders first, stating, "Their stories are the ones missing from front pages." Retiring in 1960, she endowed a USC scholarship for female cinematographers, a last swipe at the men who once wrote "morals risk" on her casting sheet. They risked careers, scandal, and safety, yet their legacies now light the path for every artist who refuses to dim their truth. Celebrate their courage by sharing this video, keeping their names alive beyond celluloid. Remember, stories breed freedom when they are heard. Together, we honor Hollywood's boldest hearts and ensure none fade into silence.